Hi, Robert Burris here again. It's Monday, October 24th. And I'm continuing on with the study of postmodernism using Dr. Stephen Hick's book, Explaining Postmodernism. And started with chapter 6, uh, got through the short section on connecting epistemology with politics. And I'm in this section on unmasking your rhetoric. And so far, we've seen that um, for a modernist, a Cartesian such as myself, recovering postmodernist, language is both functional and cognitive. Um, and it ought to be for everybody. That is what language is all about. Thinking your thoughts, you're having a conversation with yourself, and in a manner of speaking, a conversation with reality, and reality ought to inform your thinking. That's reason in a nutshell. But postmodernism proposes to subvert reason and promote chaos and basically um, they don't need to. I don't need to practice deconstruction to see behind the mask. I hope you learn to see it. Anyhow, let me pick up here, um, starting to get into the subject of rhetoric and how um, rhetoric is where language for the postmodernist becomes functional. Um, at any given time, however, a subject is a particular construction with a particular set of beliefs and interests, and the subject uses language, the subject being a person, uses language to express and further those beliefs and interests. Language, thus, is functional, and this brings us to rhetoric. For the modernist, the functionality of language is complementary to its being cognitive. An individual observes reality perceptually, forms conceptual beliefs about reality on the basis of those perceptions, and then acts in reality on the basis of those perceptual and conceptual cognitive states. Some of those actions in the world are social interactions, and some of those social interactions, language assume in some of those social interactions, language assumes a communicatory function. In communicating with each other, individuals narrate, argue, or otherwise attempt to pass on their cognitive beliefs about the world. Rhetoric, then, is an aspect of language's communicatory function, referring to those methods of using language that aid in the effectiveness of cognition during linguistic communication. Now, when I was deep in the postmodernism, being a product of a stooge product of our public schools and being quite not knowing it at the time, but being quite Marxist in my ideology. Um, I think I probably never would have been able to struggle through that paragraph, but it's I just find it um, really speaks now, and Dr. X is using, you might say, rather technical language to map out, um, you know, the function of language for modernists. I probably even get a little more technical, but we all ought to be able to grasp that and understand what he said there. And it's essential that you try to grasp it. By the way, his book is available on his website. I put a link in the description of the video, and I encourage you to go download a copy of PDF. Even better, buy a copy of it from Amazon, or I think it might even be available at Barnes & Noble. It's very modestly priced. You get it for the Kindle, or here I've got it using the Kindle reader on a Barnes & Noble Nook tablet. So I'd encourage you to get the book. Well, anyway, so that's the modern view, that it's functional, that rhetoric is just a part of language, just a part of communication. For the postmodernists, language cannot be cognitive. Again, mark that down, that cognition, thought, is rightly a part of language and communication. For modernists, this whole postmodern thing is a proposition in stoogery, and for the postmodernists, it's not. It's something else, as we're about to see. For the postmodernists, language cannot be cognitive because it does not connect to reality, whether to an external nature or to an underlying self. Language is not, oh, getting a little messed up here with the page turning. Language is not about being aware of the world, or about distinguishing the true from the false, or even about argument in the traditional sense of validity, of soundness and probability. Accordingly, postmodernism recasts the nature of rhetoric. And how do they recast it? Rhetoric is persuasion in the absence of cognition. In other words, it's babble, and you're not supposed to think about it. Just soak it in. Don't think critically. Just soak it in. Be led, like some say, put your hands in some satanic shepherd's head or hand, and just be led, folks. I mean, that's kind of the idea. I'm using Christian language, but this is, if there is a devil, he's a postmodernist. Okay, so and that's a charge too. That's a nasty thing to say about postmodernism, that they're so evil that they want you to disconnect your brain. Rhetoric is persuasion for the postmodernist in the absence of cognition. Boy, that's harsh. I mean, that's a hard charge. Well, he substantiates it right away, quoting Richard Rorty. Richard Rorty makes this point clear in his essay, The Contingency of Language. Why is language contingent if it's nothing but lies? Well, what's odd is the double talker postmodernist Richard Rorty, that's contingent. The failure of the realist position, Rorty argues, has shown that the world does not tell us what language games to play. It's all about games. And that human languages are human creations. The purpose of language is therefore not to argue in an attempt to prove or disprove anything. Accordingly, Rorty concludes that that is not what he is doing. No, he's not. He's not communicating. Or no, wait a minute. He's not, lying to you when he uses language. No, Rorty is like, Christ. He's a good shepherd. but everybody else is a liar, right? I mean, that's the implication. When he uses language to persuade us of his version of solidarity, conforming to my own, quoting Rorty, conforming to my own precepts, I am not going to offer arguments against the vocabulary I want to replace. Um, it just popped in my head. Orwell. This is very Orwellian. Orwell has a section in his book, 1984. And this is one thing I really appreciate about Orwell. He understood. I think he saw this thing coming, maybe. Don't mean to give him too much credit, but he has a section in there where they're talking about how Big Brother had people dedicated to revising language, to dumbing it down. And at one point, he has a character saying, "There's nothing as beautiful as the destruction of words." And this is what we're already saying. He wants to replace vocabulary. And how's he going to replace it? Instead, I'm going to try to make the vocabulary I favor look attractive by showing how it may be used to describe a variety of topics. Again, he's going to lead you by example, having sold you this nonsense that you can't trust yourself, you can't trust your own mind. No, he's going to try to sell you on the idea you can trust yourself and trust your own mind, but this is after he's already subverted the notion that there's anything honest to be learned from the world, basically. I mean, that's the implication. So he's going to lead by example, make this new vocabulary he wants to give you look attractive and show you how to use it. Again, very Orwellian. The language here is of attractiveness in the absence of cognition, truth, or argument. Logic goes out the window. That's the idea. By temperament and in the content of his politics, Rorty is the least extreme of the leading postmodernists. This is apparent in the kind of language he uses in political discourse. Again, he's like the good shepherd here. Language is a tool of social interaction, and one's model of social interaction dictates what kind of tool language is used as. Rorty sees a great deal of pain and suffering in the world, much conflict between groups, so language to him is primarily a tool of conflict resolution. To that end, his language pushes empathy and sensitivity and toleration, although he suggests that those virtues may apply only within the range of our ethnocentric predicament. So it's a race thing, a class thing, which, again, what did I say? The first video, I made the assertion, about this being a socialist thing, a communist thing. Much here in common with Marxism. It's actually, I think this comes out of Marxism. It's a version of Marxism that's almost stripped of the economics. And Marxism is a full-blown philosophy, really. But this is Marxism that Americans can love. It's a nice introduction to it, Get you stupefied, then you start buying into some of the communist stuff. So anyway, that's what Rorty's all about, ethnocentric predicament. Quoting Rorty, we must in practice privilege our own group. Yeah, that's exactly what the communists did. Start dividing people up into classes, but their group, certain classes were very privileged. Not much different than what we have here in America to some extent, other than the fact that you have the opportunity to rise above your class. My class was formerly postmodern stooge. I'm trying to rise above that here. Most other postmodernists, however, see the conflicts between groups as more brutal and our prospects for empathy as more severely limited than does Rorty. Using language as a tool of conflict resolution is therefore not on their horizon. Rorty is somewhat of an exception. That he wants to use this new stupefaction for a good purpose. His heart, it might be in the right place. Never mind the evil of his propositions. Um, in a conflict that cannot reach peaceful resolution, the kind of tool one wants is a weapon. And so, given the conflict models of social relations that dominate postmodern discourse, again, they're very much Marxist. They're at war with an old order as they see it. You may remember Tony Jones saying that embracing postmodernism for the church was to tear down the old and rebuild something more glorious. Again, very communist, very Leninist. Um, and so, given the conflict models of social relations that dominate postmodern discourse, it makes perfect sense that to most postmodernists, language is primarily a weapon. So these guys, once you embrace their idiotic proposition that you can't trust your own um, language processor, and there's no way you're going to get truth, um, then they're going to use language against you and just about anybody else that gets in their way. And which is interesting too, because and this is something I pray to God people will see. Again, I'm a Christian. This is very secular stuff here, but I pray to God people will see the evil of what's being also proposed here, because language is a weapon. It can and will be used against you by these people. Again, the whole proposition, they deliver this proposition to you that you cannot trust your God-given faculties, that language is useless, that we need a new vocabulary, a new logos. And so that's one way they're using it against you. Um, the other way, if you really get deep into this, they're going to make a class warrior out of you, and you're going to want to help tear down the old order and rebuild God only knows what. Am I using the word God here too much? This is very spiritual, friends. Um, anyway, language is primarily a weapon in postmodernists. This explains the harsh nature of much of postmodern rhetoric. I'm going to wrap up this section here. The regular deployments of ad hominem, the setting up of straw men, and the regular attempts to silence opposing voices are all logical consequences of postmodern epistemology of language. Stanley Fish, as noted in Chapter 4 of this very book, again, invite you to get a copy, as noted in Chapter 4, calls the opponents of racial preferences as something like, in this case, I think, what's the word? Affirmative action. If you oppose affirmative action, you're a racial bigot, according to Stanley Fish. Bigots, and lumps them in with the Ku Klux Klan. You're a Klansman if you think that we shouldn't give preference based on race. Andrea Dworkin calls heterosexual males rapists. Just for being born male, you're a rapist. Get over it, according to Andrea Dworkin. And repeatedly labels America as a fascist state. Well, there is quite a bit of fascism in America these days, with these bailouts, banksters, and government hand in hand, um, robbing the taxpayers of wealth and selling, going deep into debt and then selling America like a drunken horde of the Chinese. Yeah, there's some fascism. But no, America wasn't founded on fascism. That's the implication with this gal, no doubt. Um, liberty and freedom, that's fascist. It's ridiculous, but it's not funny. With such rhetoric, truth or falsity, it doesn't matter whether it's true, it doesn't matter where it's false. It's not the issue. What matters primarily is the language effectiveness. Because, buying into their uh, ideology, you're not even going to know what the truth is anyway, so don't worry about it. If we are now If we now add to the postmodern epistemology of language the far left politics of the leading postmodernists and their first-hand awareness of the crises of socialist thought and practice, then the verbal weaponry has to become explosive. He's wrapping up this section of on unmasking rhetoric, about to introduce the socialist components of this, and which I think already has been well established, but he's going to nail it down here. Boy, I've used up 21 minutes. I was hoping to keep each one of these down to 15. I'm at a loss for words here. If you're following along, I would hope that you would be too, other than just to say, holy cow. Uh, I'm intending to start to document some examples of how this ideology. I mean, Dr. Hicks does a fine job of documenting the words of these people, and uh, at one time or another, I would have argued, as a postmodern stooge, I would have argued, so what? People said these things, and they think these things. Is that a crime? And what does it really matter? Oh yeah, like everybody's gonna jump on board, and blah blah blah, and what's the big deal? Where's your tinfoil hat? you know, I want to see it. Well, um, all you have to do is study history, and this is history in the making in many respects. Certainly in the first 5 chapters of this book, he's laid the historical foundations for this. And there's a lot of philosophy that we can cover that's led up to this. Francis Schaeffer, who has been very helpful to me in understanding this in a Christian context, um, and others. He certainly isn't the first one, but have labeled these streams of philosophy philosophies of despair. And it's sort of like I said in yesterday's video, when you start to think about this and the seriousness of it, that the propositions and the implications that one might embrace those propositions and what it leads to. Um, there you go, despair. Believing that language is nothing but deception. And what's to keep one from, in his own mind, from feeling like he's uh, all he can have is deception. That's a picture of psychosis, in a manner of speaking. Really, it is. I've had some interactions with people who were in serious mental distress, and there is a logic at work with these people. That is how they can come to well, first of all, they're like children lost in a wilderness. The world becomes a very hostile place for them. For most of them, I mean, psychosis. I think we're pretty safe. I'm pretty safe in saying that the world becomes a rather hostile place. That they feel outcast, and they really well. It used to be that in this country that we had people who were seriously troubled, committed to mental institutions, and back in like the 70s, perhaps even the early 80s, they would do an evaluation, and they would use various tools to evaluate the person's cognitive abilities, just their basic cognitive abilities. And some of those things, Rorschach tests and other tests. Rorschach is the one I can really remember offhand. There's others, asking questions and asking for some narrative. And that's kind of what a Rorschach test is about. Here's an ink blot. Tell me about it. And let the person's imagination run wild. And much of that is for the purpose to determine whether therapy, talking therapy, is going to be a fruitful mode of treatment. And if someone was proved through an evaluation to be unable to benefit from that therapy, they wouldn't receive it. Chances are they receive, some drugs to help control their symptoms, or maybe their anger, their fear, whatever, and they might receive shock treatments. And maybe the hope for that person was that someday that they could get to this point where psychotherapy would be beneficial. But the whole idea is again, it's like a child lost in the woods, and they need a guide, to help them get back to the world of sanity, to rationality. And so one ought to be concerned about the irrationality of this philosophy, the sinister irrationality of it, and also how these fellows propose to communicate it, in the sense of communicating a disease. They can say out of one side of their mouth that communication is masks and it's deception. But isn't it interesting how they use these? Well, we haven't established it in the study, but these guys write books. These emergent church guys write lots of books. And they're trying to communicate this stoogery to people. And and they try to make it very, like Rorty, make it attractive. And we live in a time where lots of people fall for that. I've fallen for it, in a manner of speaking. I remember being quite young, and I was very proud of myself, thinking that I could lie in a way that was it wasn't bad. I called it manipulating the truth, and it was actually a noble thing, because I was doing it for a noble purpose. Well, if it's for my benefit. It's noble, and gosh darn it, maybe it was good for other people too. They just didn't really know it. But I remember being very proud of coming up with that notion of manipulating the truth, as a very clever, noble thing that I could put in my arsenal, to cope with life. And fact of the matter is that lying subverts communication. Um, and at the time, I didn't know just how vital communication is, and I would hope that we learn as we. I hope if you watch this video, you're going to watch a few more and maybe pick up the book, whether it's me or Dr. Hicks or somebody else reasoning with you. I hope you'll reason with this. Going to use language to do it, and it's not for the purpose of deceiving. And hope you'll be able to see through the mask of of this evil. Going to wrap it up. Thanks.